lead appearing in children's cinnamon applesauce packets for their school lunch. The cinnamon was adulterated with lead, which was added by the manufacturer in order to increase the weight of the product to make it more profitable in the process. However, the applesauce contamination issue could have been completely prevented if end product inspections for food were required. The FDA asked Congress to amend the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act as part of the FY 2024 budget request to require that industry conduct testing of final products exactly for such contaminants and provide FDA immediate access to those results. This would greatly help to ensure the safety of all of our food products for kids and for everyone else. But the FDA needs these additional authorities to make that happen. And Mr. Chairman, I was very pleased to hear your opening comments, and I hope you would join me in supporting giving the FDA additional regulatory authority precisely to address the kinds of problems that both you and I have identified. The FDA itself has proposed multiple solutions that would address the problems we're talking about today. The Democrats support greater and more refined regulatory authority to make our food and drugs safer, and we hope our colleagues will join us. In the wake of infant formula and prescription drug shortages, FDA also advanced legislative proposals earlier this year to strengthen notification requirements and data sharing. Right now, they don't have any authority to tell drug manufacturers to produce more drugs. One proposal they've offered would require manufacturers to notify the FDA, dealing with this first problem of the applesauce, would require manufacturers to notify FDA about pathogens that are discovered in certain critical foods. In the case of infant formula, this authority would help FDA prevent contaminated infant formula from reaching any more consumers and babies. A second proposal they've suggested would expand FDA's authority to gather data from industry about potential drug shortages and supply chain disruptions. FDA has improved access to contraception and protections for medication abortion access. In 2021, FDA advanced the accessibility of medication abortion by removing the in-person dispensing requirement for mifepristone and allowing it to be distributed by mail through retail pharmacies. In July 2023, FDA approved the first over-the-counter birth control pill, O-pill. As a result, consumers' access to contraception is improved at a critical time when many states are enacting increasingly draconian and oppressive abortion restrictions. FDA has also made advancements to combat a range of life-threatening diseases. In March of last year, FDA approved the first OTC opioid overdose reversal medication, naloxone nasal spray, a critical step towards reducing opioid overdose deaths in our districts. FDA also recently approved new genome editing technologies to treat sickle cell anemia, a disease that has ravaged a lot of communities, primarily African Americans. This advancement is a crucial step towards treating sickle cell anemia and represents a breakthrough in gene therapy. FDA also secured additional supply chains in the wake of cancer drug shortages. It's crucial that FDA continue to carry out its mission and create meaningful regulations based on sound science and not conspiracy theories or ideological programs. Public attacks on FDA without any corresponding legislative solutions simply undermine its ability to effectively protect public health. Anti-abortion activists brought a case against FDA over its updated guidance on mifepristone, the first of a two-pill medication abortion. The activists claim that FDA did not properly collect data on drug risks and complications. However, this claim is contrary to the FDA's review of, quote, extensive research showing that mifepristone is safe, including to take it home, unquote. FDA followed its standard procedure in reaching that conclusion, and according to the FDA, it must act reasonably based on the information available rather than act based on perfect data, which seldom exists. If the objective of anti-abortion activists is to undermine FDA's authority, the consequences will be devastating to public health. An FDA that bases its decisions on political science rather than actual science is not in the best interest of consumers. Congress must ensure that FDA is empowered to rely on the facts rather than bend to the will of people pushing an ideological agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now, pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witness will please stand and raise his right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show the witness answered in the affirmative. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Now, let me remind the witness, who I'm pretty sure you're an old pro at this by now. We've read your written statement, and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it's on and that members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes is expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I now recognize Commissioner Califf to please begin his opening statement. Califf.
Thank you, Chair Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to testify about the Food and Drug Administration's work to protect and promote public health. In the United States, the safety of medical, food, and cosmetic products depends on the actions of both industry and the FDA. Industry bears the responsibility of creating a supply of medical, food, and cosmetic products that are safe and protect and promote public health. FDA guides and oversees industry to help ensure that Americans can have a confidence about the medical, food, and cosmetic products they're using, and that they're duly warned about the risks of tobacco products. From that lens, I'd like to focus on the agency's work in 4 main areas today. First, addressing vulnerabilities in the supply chain. Second, reversing the decline in our national life expectancy. Third, accelerating effective treatment for thousands of rare genetic diseases. And fourth, undertaking the most significant reorganization in FDA history with a focus on human foods and improving oversight of all of our regulated industries. As we saw during the pandemic and continue to see, we have a significant global supply chain vulnerability, including lack of redundancy and resiliency, and over-reliance on foreign sources for critical products, particularly medicines and devices. Preventing and mitigating supply chain issues in the industries we regulate have been a primary focus. In 2023 alone, we worked with manufacturers to prevent over 230 threatened drug shortages. During the infant formula shortage, FDA's use of temporary enforcement discretion enabled safe products to enter the U.S. market, which increased supply and doubled the number of firms producing infant formula for the U.S. from 2021 to 2022. FDA's continued oversight will be critical until supply chains are more resilient, particularly for infant formula. We'll continue to promote competition in manufacturing quality and implement modernized systems to respond to shortages faster. It's why we've requested additional authorities that would provide more visibility into the supply chain. The trends in life expectancy and chronic disease in the U.S. are concerning. And while we're leading the world in the creation of new drugs and devices, our major causes of death and disability are driven by fundamentals: tobacco use, poor nutrition, and lack of adherence to inexpensive generic medications. Given the burden of tobacco-related diseases, it's encouraging that over the past year we've seen a reduction in cigarette smoking in the U.S. and a significant decrease in overall tobacco product use among high school students, primarily driven by a decline in e-cigarette use. Despite these important wins, driven by a combination of education and enforcement actions, our work is not finished. We remain committed to reducing the health burden of tobacco product use in the U.S. Food safety and improved nutrition are essential to combat the epidemic of chronic disease and premature death. A healthier food supply coupled with improvements in key nutrition information will help consumers make informed health choices. This includes proposed actions to display simplified, at-a-glance, front-of-package nutrition information, to establish voluntary sodium targets, update the definition of the term healthy in advertising, and to create a nutrition center of excellence. Thanks to Congress's investment in the Human Genome Project decades ago, many of the approximately 10,000 rare diseases, which impact at least 30 million Americans, can now be treated with new gene editing and gene therapy technologies. We're preparing to navigate a large number of these exciting therapies that will require new clinical trial methods, deep scientific reviewer expertise, and development of reliable long-term follow-up systems involving electronic health records for real-world evidence. Lastly, the agency has made significant progress in its proposed reorganization. The proposal aims to unify human foods functions into the new Human Foods Program under the direction of the Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods and to solidify the Office of Regulatory Affairs' role as the front line of FDA's field-based operations. This will enhance our outbreak response and fully realize the preventive vision of the FDA Food Safety Modernization Act. These proposed changes will strengthen the agency, making it more efficient, nimble, and ready for the future with the ever-changing and complex industry we regulate. In conclusion, the essential work of the agency continues in thousands of work streams that Americans in the world count on every day, thanks to the dedication and perseverance of FDA staff. We look forward to continuing to work with Congress on the agency's mission, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We'll now begin the questioning phase. Chair recognizes Representative Gossar from Arizona for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, obviously, the FDA made a mistake in granting the emergency use authorization and license of COVID-19 vaccines. It has been confirmed that the vaccines do not stop transmission. Moreover, 1,635,048 injuries due to COVID-19 vaccines have been reported to the Health and Human Services through the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, including 37,382 deaths. Considering that under 10,300 deaths have been reported due to all other vaccines combined, the harm due to COVID-19 vaccines is absolutely staggering. And not to mention that there is no accountability. Legally, it is impossible to sue COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers for the injuries caused by their products. Just last month, a federal court forced the FDA to retract tweets and statements for its years-long smear campaign against ivermectin as an effective treatment for COVID-19. Now let's enter Ozempic. J.P. Morgan predicts that the market of Ozempic and similar drugs will exceed $100 billion by 2030. Concerningly, there is a plethora of federal lawsuits, 18 in all so far, alleging serious side effects from this class of drugs, also known as glucagon-like peptide-1 receptor agonists, or GLP-1RAs, gastroparesis, or simply stomach paralysis, and several severe indigestion, obstruction, and vomiting have been cited in the lawsuits. One woman claimed to have lost teeth from excessive and frequent vomiting. One law firm is investigating the claims of additional 10,000 people potentially harmed by this class of drugs. The plaintiffs predict 20,000 total people will be suing manufacturers of the GLP-1RAs in the future. The European Medicine Agency is investigating Ozempic for suicidal ideation, according to Forbes. Also, according to Forbes, studies indicate that Ozempic and the other GLP-1RAs, like Rybelsus and Wegovy, may cause gallbladder disease. Furthermore, a recent study linked Ozempic to thyroid cancer. Ozempic is basically a synthetic hormone that tells your brain that it is full, therefore by deactivating digestion, as well as causing the pancreas to increase insulin levels in order to lower blood sugar. Many Ozempic patients face blockages and obstructions. That makes sense as the body is being fooled into stopping to that digestive pathway. Does purposely paralyzing the stomach strike you as a healing type of a remedy? It doesn't to me. It seems that the goal of Big Pharma is to get people hooked on for life on their products, whether it be an annual flu or COVID-19 vaccines, perpetual statins or lower cholesterol, beta blockers for high blood pressure, expensive never-ending cancer treatments. Yet all this intervention doesn't seem to yield much fruit. Chronic disease is skyrocketing. 50% of American adults have a chronic disease. 40% have two or more. Are Ozempic and related drugs the next big things Big Pharma is going to push on millions of people, no matter what the harms or lack of or effectiveness? The head of the FDA, you should like to take this opportunity to express your regret, or as head of the FDA, would you like to take an opportunity to express your regret in failing to curtail the chronic disease epidemic in America?
I would like to respond to, you raised so many issues, and I've got a minute and 20 seconds, so I'll just start with the vaccine, which I think may be the most important one to talk about. So here's the progression as I see it. First of all, I'm pretty simple. I'm from South Carolina, and I'm a cardiologist. I'm used to looking at life and death and seeing what the differences are. The question with any medical intervention, knowing that all interventions have risks and benefits, and the question is always, do the benefits outweigh the risk? I'll remind you, the initial vaccine trial that led to the EUA did show a dramatic reduction in the rate of infection in the two groups. The virus then mutated, but the good news is now we have a progression of overwhelming evidence in every country, including the United States.
So would you take
a on your vaccine?
I understand this, but
you're less likely to be dead. You're less likely to be admitted to the intensive care unit. If you live in a county with a higher vaccine rate, the mortality rate is lower. If you live in a country with a higher vaccine rate, the mortality rate is lower. So when you compare the two, yes, vaccines have side effects. The risk of being dead is lower if you're vaccinated.
Okay, so wouldn't you agree, this is my last question because I'm running out of time. Don't you agree that the vaccine should have put into the fund or face liability issues? Because the people were used as guinea pigs. Do you believe in peer-reviewed science? Because there's another part that didn't get really reviewed very well.
Well, I'll remind you again, we always have to do studies or clinical trials to figure out the risks and the benefits. That's a normal part in most of my career. I personally participate in clinical trials when I have the chance so that we can have the data and the knowledge to make wise decisions. For example, and get vaccinated so we're less likely to be dead.
I get that, but why did you have to retract everything you said about ivermectin? Because your office came out against ivermectin. Now, I agree that there's some problems in the manufacturing of that dosage, but if in doubt, leave it out.
Well, we didn't retract everything we had to say about ivermectin. And in fact, you posited that we had an attack against ivermectin. Drugs are not.
I hope the courts are watching this right now because they ordered you to.
If you look at the randomized trials of ivermectin, and there are many of them now, there is no benefit of ivermectin in the treatment of COVID. That's a statement, just a fact. And any drug for which there's no benefit and there are risks, people have to make their own decisions about what to do. What we're not doing is telling doctors what they have to do. Doctors have the right to prescribe off-label.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair now recognizes ranking member for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm going to follow up on this because this exchange to me was extremely illuminating, because what we have here is the commissioner who's the head of the Food and Drug Administration, and then we get a drive-by spray of propaganda, disinformation, and ideological attacks. So let me try to sort some of this out, and maybe we'll help to illuminate why we have a Food and Drug Administration rather than leaving it to politicians in state legislatures or in Congress to make decisions based on ideological whim. But let's start with ivermectin, which I believe is an animal deworming agent that some people were advocating for use to treat COVID-19. Has this been approved as a form of treatment or a cure for COVID-19?
No, it has not, if I may. I should also point out, it also has benefit for humans with worms, which is a huge problem in Asia. So it actually won a Nobel Prize because it's an amazing drug, both for animals and humans who have worms. And there was a good reason to think it may work in the case of COVID, and that's why, thankfully, the community, including the NIH, did a number of randomized clinical trials. There's just no benefit, and that's true of most things that we try. There's nothing wrong with thinking it might work. It just didn't.
Well, what about hydroxychloroquine, which was another thing that was advocated?
Basically the same story. There was really exciting preliminary work in the laboratory that said hydroxychloroquine may have activity against COVID, so the randomized trials were done. Unfortunately, no benefit. Again, nothing wrong with thinking it may work and trying it out in a randomized trial, but then we have the data now, so that leads you to the conclusion. So we have not been able to grant an indication for those.
I mean, I'm aware of a lot of political attacks and criticism against the FDA, but I can never figure out the coherence of it. Sometimes they seem to be saying, get out of the way and just let anybody advocate whatever they want and use whatever they want without any testing and without the various protocols you go through. And then other times they attack you because you don't have enough authority to do the things that we would want you to do in order to make kids' cinnamon applesauce clean, for example. So let's take that one, which has caught my eye since we certainly ate a lot of cinnamon applesauce in our house when our kids were little. Let's see. Your FDA-regulated products are manufactured or handled at something like 275 or 280,000 different registered facilities across the land. So what keeps you from inspecting every private manufacturing facility that produces things like cinnamon applesauce or peanut butter?
Well, if I may, I'll try to do this very quickly. I think the best way to think about FDA in general is that we're referees. You all in Congress actually write the rule book, much like in any sport. It's the leadership that writes the rule book. We enact what's in the rule book. And in the case of food establishments, like most sports, the first line of defense are the players in the game, which is the industry that produces the products. And by and large, they do a great job, but sometimes they don't. And as referees, we have to be really wise about where we step in because we don't have an unlimited budget. So what keeps us from inspecting all 275,000? You don't have to be a brilliant mathematician to know how many people you'd have to have. But what we can do, for example, in food for children, is to have the manufacturers be required to do the testing, which is the way the drug system works. The manufacturers of drugs have to test every batch. And in the case of cinnamon and applesauce, if there had been mandatory testing, when it got imported into the U.S. from Ecuador, the stores that were selling it probably would have picked it up at that point.
And those kids ended up with lead poisoning, right?
Right, lead poisoning is a very serious problem, as you know, and it causes chronic issues.
So you advocated mandatory testing. You would like us to give you that regulatory authority.
Yes.
And I do hope that's something that our colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle would join us in. In the case of infant formula shortages, last Congress we passed a bipartisan bill to help address those shortages, but nearly 200 House Republicans voted against a second bill to give FDA resources to strengthen its oversight and inspection of facilities to prevent shortages like that from happening. So we can't have it both ways. If we want an effective, strong regulator, we've got to give them the authority and the resources to get the job done. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. Grofman from Wisconsin for 5 minutes.
Thank you much. I don't know this is why you came over here, but we're going to give you another another COVID-related topic. Throughout the COVID epidemic, I spoke multiple times on the floor with regard to the value of vitamin D. Now, the adequate level of vitamin D varies depending upon how you talk to, 20 nanograms, 30 nanograms, 50 nanograms. But whatever the study you look at, the number of lives saved if everybody had